My name is Julian Rourke. I'm 35 years old, and until 4 months ago, I thought loyalty meant something in corporate America. I was wrong. Dead wrong. For 7 years, I poured my soul into Northbridge Compliance, a mid-sized consulting firm based in downtown Chicago. I wasn't just another employee shuffling papers in a cubicle. I was the direct liaison for our two biggest clients, Meridian Financial and Global Tech Solutions. Combined, these contracts brought in nearly $15 million annually. $15 million. That's not pocket change, even for a company our size. I knew these clients inside and out. I understood their compliance needs, their quarterly deadlines, their internal politics. When Meridian's CFO had questions at midnight, he called me. When Global Tech needed emergency documentation for an SEC audit, I was the guy who made it happen. My phone was always on, my laptop always ready. That's who I was. That's who I thought they valued. Then my mother died. Mom had been battling cancer for 8 months. I'd been flying back and forth to Omaha every other weekend, trying to balance work with being there for her. My supervisor at the time, Janet Morrison, knew about the situation. She was understanding, flexible. But Janet retired in January 2025, and that's when everything changed. Brent Haskett became my new supervisor, 40 years old, MBA from Northwestern, and hungry. Too hungry. From day one, I could see him eyeing my client relationships like a wolf watching a flock of sheep. He'd insert himself into calls, CC himself on emails, make suggestions that showed he had no clue what he was talking about. But I kept my head down. I had bigger things to worry about. Mom passed on a Tuesday morning in March 2025. I called the office immediately, spoke to Brent directly. I need 4 days off, I told him. Funeral's Thursday, but I need time to help my dad with arrangements. He paused for what felt like forever before saying, "Fine, but make sure your clients know you're unavailable." I thanked him, hung up, and focused on what mattered, saying goodbye to the woman who raised me. The funeral was beautiful, small, intimate. My father, my sister, a few close friends. We buried her in the same cemetery where her parents rest, under an oak tree she used to sit beneath when she was a girl. I stayed an extra day to help my father sort through paperwork, insurance claims, the countless details that death leaves behind. If you enjoy stories of cold-blooded revenge and gripping plot twists, like this video and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new, unreleased stories here every day, each one more intense than the last. I drove back to Chicago on Sunday evening, planning to return to work Monday morning. But when I walked into the Northbridge building and swiped my badge, nothing happened. The little light stayed red. I tried again. Still red. A security guard I'd known for years looked at me with genuine confusion. "Julian, your badge isn't working." He called upstairs, spoke quietly into his radio, then looked back at me with something that might have been pity. "They want you to go straight to HR." I took the elevator to the 5th floor, my stomach churning. Sarah from HR was waiting with a manila envelope and a look that told me everything I needed to know. "Julian, I'm sorry. There's been a decision made about your employment." She slid the envelope across the table. Inside was a single sheet of paper, 1 paragraph. No letterhead, no signature, just a cold clinical dismissal. "Due to your recent absence, which compromised the delivery of critical client projects, your employment with Northbridge Compliance is terminated effective immediately." I read it twice, 3 times. The words didn't change. 4 days. I'd taken 4 approved days off to bury my mother, and they were firing me for it. "Who made this decision?" I asked Sarah. She shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Haskett felt that the client relationships had been damaged by your unavailability." I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I folded the letter, put it back in the envelope, and walked out. I didn't clean out my desk. I didn't say goodbye to colleagues. I walked to my car, sat in the parking garage for 10 minutes, and made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to fight this. Not directly. Not emotionally. I was going to let them hang themselves with their own rope. That evening, I called my lawyer. David Martinez had handled my mother's estate planning, and I trusted him. "Julian, "I'm so sorry for your loss," he said when I explained what had happened. "And now this. Do you have documentation of the approved leave?" I did. Email confirmations, HR records, even a text message from Brent confirming the dates. "Good," David said. "Don't do anything rash. Let me review this." While David worked his angle, I started mine. I didn't rage on social media or blast the company to anyone who'd listen. Instead, I did what I do best. I documented everything. Every email chain with Meridian and Global Tech, every project timeline, every success metric. I had 7 years of evidence showing exactly how valuable I was to those relationships. Then I made some calls. Not angry calls. Professional ones. "Hi Tom, this is Julian Rourke from Northbridge. I wanted to let you know I'm transitioning out of the company, and I wanted to personally ensure your account gets the attention it deserves." Tom Harrison, Meridian's compliance director, was shocked. "What? Julian, you're leaving? When? Why didn't anyone tell me?" I kept my voice steady. "It was a recent decision. I'm sure Brent Haskett will be in touch soon to discuss the transition." The silence on the other end was telling. Tom and I had worked together for 4 years. He knew my work, trusted my judgment. "Julian, to be honest, I'm not comfortable with this. You know our systems, our deadlines. Who's going to handle the Q2 compliance review?" I paused. Let that sink in. "I'm sure the company has a plan. But Tom, if you need any assistance during this transition, I'm starting my own consulting practice, just something to keep in mind." I made similar calls to my contacts at Global Tech. Same professional tone, same subtle message. I wasn't bad-mouthing Northbridge. I didn't have to. I was simply letting my relationships know I was available if they needed continuity of service. Nothing unethical. Nothing that violated any non-compete clauses I might have had. Just good business. Meanwhile, Brent was discovering what I'd known all along. Managing client relationships isn't just about having an MBA and ambition. It's about understanding the intricate details that keep million-dollar contracts running smoothly. Within a week, I started hearing things through the industry grapevine. Brent had missed Meridian's monthly check-in call. When he finally rescheduled, he couldn't answer basic questions about their compliance calendar. He'd sent Global Tech the wrong quarterly report template, a mistake that would have cost them thousands in penalties if their internal team hadn't caught it. My phone started ringing. First, it was Tom from Meridian. "Julian, I don't know what's happening over there, but we need to talk. This Haskett guy doesn't seem to understand our requirements." Then Jennifer Walsh from Global Tech called. "Julian, I'm going to be direct. We're concerned about service continuity. Can you help us even if you're not with Northbridge anymore?" I could have said yes immediately. Could have jumped at the chance to stick it to my former employer, but I played it smart. "I appreciate the confidence, but I think you should give Northbridge a chance to address your concerns first. If they can't meet your needs, then we can discuss options." This wasn't just about revenge. It was about building something better while watching my former employer crumble under their own incompetence. 2 weeks after my termination in late March, I filed for my LLC, Rourke Compliance Solutions. Simple, clean, professional. David helped me structure it properly, ensuring I was covered legally for what was about to happen. Because I knew it was coming. When you remove the keystone from an arch, the whole structure collapses. I was the keystone and I could already see the cracks forming. Brent made his next mistake in mid-April. He'd been trying to handle both accounts himself, probably thinking he could prove his worth by taking over completely. But he didn't understand the nuances. Meridian had specific formatting requirements for their monthly reports. Requirements that weren't written down anywhere because I'd developed them through years of working with their team. Brent sent them a generic template he'd probably downloaded from some compliance website. Tom called me within hours. "Julian, this is unacceptable. We can't work with someone who doesn't understand our processes. I'm authorized to offer you a direct consulting contract." I waited a beat. "Tom, I'd be happy to discuss that, but I think you should address this with Northbridge first. Give them a chance to correct the situation." But I knew they couldn't correct it. Brent didn't have the relationships. Didn't have the institutional knowledge. Didn't have the experience to manage $15 million in annual contracts. He had ambition and an MBA. In corporate consulting, that's like bringing a knife to a gunfight. The calls kept coming, not just from clients but from former colleagues at Northbridge. Quiet conversations over coffee, careful words that painted a picture of growing chaos in the office. Brent was working 16-hour days, snapping at support staff, making promises he couldn't keep. The smooth operation I'd spent 7 years building was falling apart in real time. And through it all, I maintained my professional demeanor. When industry contacts asked what happened at Northbridge, I simply said, "Sometimes companies make strategic decisions. I wish them well." When potential clients asked why they should work with a one-man operation instead of an established firm, I let my track record speak for itself. The breaking point came in early May, about 6 weeks after my termination. I was having lunch at a small cafe near my apartment when my phone rang. Unknown number, but I recognized the area code, downtown Chicago. I answered professionally. "Julian Rourke." "Julian, this is Rebecca Martinez, senior partner at Northbridge." I nearly choked on my sandwich. Rebecca Martinez was the woman who'd hired me 7 years ago, the co-founder of the company. I hadn't spoken to her since her semi-retirement in late 2023. "Rebecca, what can I do for you?" Her voice was strained, tired. "Julian, I need to be direct with you. We're in trouble, big trouble. Meridian just sent us a formal notice of contract review and Global Tech is threatening to terminate their agreement entirely. I've been out of the day-to-day operations, but I'm hearing things that concern me deeply." I let the silence hang for a moment. "I'm sorry to hear that, Rebecca. How can I help? I know what happened with your termination. I know about your mother, and I know the circumstances weren't handled properly. Brent made a decision that I wouldn't have made, and now we're facing the consequences." She paused. "Julian, I need you to come back. Name your terms." This was it. The moment I'd been preparing for without even realizing it. But I didn't jump. I didn't show satisfaction or relief. I simply said, "Rebecca, I appreciate the call, but I'm not sure that's the best solution for anyone involved. Julian, please, I've looked at the numbers. These 2 clients represent 60% of our annual revenue. Without them, we're looking at massive layoffs, possibly shuttering the entire operation. You built these relationships. You understand these accounts better than anyone." I could hear the desperation in her voice, and part of me felt bad for her. Rebecca was a good person who'd built something meaningful. But business is business. "Rebecca, I've started my own practice. I have commitments now. If Northbridge is having service delivery issues, perhaps the problem isn't just personnel. Maybe it's systematic." She was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, "What would it take? What would you need to consider coming back?" I'd been thinking about this conversation for weeks, preparing for exactly this moment. "Rebecca, if we're going to have this discussion, it needs to be formal. I'd need to see the current contract situations, understand exactly what's happening, and evaluate whether this is something I can commit to long-term. Of course. Can you come in tomorrow? Say, 10 a.m. I can do that. But Rebecca, I need you to understand, I'm not the same employee who left 6 weeks ago. If we're going to work together, it's going to be as equals, with proper recognition and compensation for the value I bring." The next morning, I walked into the Northbridge building wearing my best suit. The security guard who'd watched my badge fail 6 weeks earlier smiled broadly. "Good to see you back, Mr. Rourke." Temporary visitor badge, but the gesture felt right. Rebecca's office was on the 7th floor, corner suite with a view of the Chicago River. I'd been there many times over the years, but never like this. Never as someone they needed more than I needed them. She looked exhausted. The confident, sharp-dressed executive I remembered was replaced by someone who clearly hadn't been sleeping well. The papers scattered across her desk told the story. Contract termination notices, client complaint letters, financial projections that painted a grim picture. "Julian, thank you for coming. I want to start by apologizing. The way you were treated was inexcusable. Losing your mother and then having to deal with that termination. It was wrong. I nodded but didn't respond immediately. Let her fill the silence. I've spent the last 3 days reviewing everything. Meridian is giving us 30 days to address their service concerns, or they're moving to another firm. Global Tech is even more direct. They want you back specifically, or they're out. She slid a folder across the desk. These are the complaint letters. I think you should see exactly what we're dealing with. I read them carefully. Tom Harrison from Meridian had been diplomatic but firm. The current service delivery does not meet our established standards. We require immediate remediation or will be forced to seek alternative solutions. Global Tech's Jennifer Walsh had been more direct. The transition of our account has been poorly managed. We specifically request the return of Julian Rourke or equivalent expertise. Rebecca, I'm going to be frank with you, these relationships took years to build. They're not just about technical competence, they're about trust, understanding, and consistent delivery. Brent may be intelligent, but intelligence isn't the same as experience. I know. I made a mistake leaving him in charge without proper oversight. But Julian, what's done is done. The question is, can we fix this? I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. What happened to Brent? She looked uncomfortable. Brent is no longer with the company as of yesterday. I terminated his employment after reviewing the client feedback and operational reports. Perfect. The architect of my dismissal was already gone, removed by his own incompetence. But I wasn't done. Rebecca, if I were to consider returning, I'd need certain assurances. First, I want the senior account director position with full autonomy over client relationships. Second, I want a 25% salary increase from my previous compensation, plus performance bonuses tied to client retention. Third, I want a formal written apology for the circumstances of my termination, and I want it sent to me via email. Her eyebrows went up at that last request. An email apology? Yes. The same way I was terminated. If we're going to rebuild trust, it starts with acknowledging how that trust was broken. She was quiet for a full minute, probably calculating whether she had any other options. Finally, she nodded. Done. All of it. Can you start Monday? I smiled for the first time since entering her office. I can do that. But Rebecca, there's one more thing. I want Brent's termination handled the exact same way mine was. Email notification, effective immediately. No conversation, no warning. I want him to understand exactly what that feels like. She looked surprised, then slowly nodded. I understand. It's already been done that way. I walked out of that meeting with everything I wanted. But the real satisfaction came when I got home and checked my messages. My former colleague, Lisa Chen from accounting, had sent me a screenshot earlier that day. It was an email from HR, sent to Brent at 3:47 p.m. on Thursday, with the subject line, employment termination, effective immediately. The body was brief. Due to performance issues that have compromised client relationships and project delivery, your employment with Northbridge Compliance is terminated effective immediately. Please return all company property and direct any questions to human resources. The same cold, clinical language, the same lack of explanation or discussion, the same brutal dismissal that had been used on me after 7 years of dedication. Perfect poetic justice. But the best part came later that evening. My phone rang around 8 p.m., Brent's number. I debated not answering, but curiosity won. Hello, Brent. Julian. His voice was tight, controlled anger barely contained. I know what you did. I know you're behind this. I'm sorry, I don't know what you mean. I heard you're no longer with Northbridge. That's unfortunate. Cut the shit, Julian. You poisoned them against me. You sabotaged those client relationships. I laughed, genuinely amused. Brent, I didn't have to sabotage anything. You did that all by yourself. I was fired 6 weeks ago, remember? By email, after my mother's funeral. You made that decision. Everything that happened after that was just consequences. The silence stretched out before he spoke again. You think you're so smart, don't you? No, Brent. I think I'm experienced. There's a difference. You wanted my job, my clients, my relationships. But you didn't want to put in the 7 years of work it took to build them. You thought you could just take over and somehow be me. That's not how it works. He hung up on me. I never heard from him again. Monday morning in mid-May, I walked back into Northbridge as senior account director with full autonomy over the client relationships I'd built. Rebecca had sent the formal apology email Sunday evening. Professional, acknowledgement of the mistake, commitment to better processes in the future. I printed it out and put it in my desk drawer, right next to the original termination letter. Bookends to the strangest 7 weeks of my professional life. My first calls were to Tom and Jennifer. Both conversations were brief and professional. "This is Julian Rourke, calling to discuss the continuation of your compliance services with Northbridge Compliance." Relief was evident in both their voices. Tom actually laughed. "Thank God, Julian. I was starting to think we'd have to find a completely new firm." Jennifer was more direct. "What took so long? We've been waiting for you to fix this mess." Within 2 weeks, both contracts were renewed for another year. Meridian even expanded their scope of work, adding an additional $2 million to the annual revenue. Global Tech restructured their compliance calendar based on some improvements I'd been thinking about during my forced time away. The office dynamic was different now, obviously. I wasn't just back, I was back with authority, with recognition, with the kind of respect that comes from being indispensable. Colleagues who had watched my abrupt departure and equally dramatic return treated me with a mixture of curiosity and deference. I was the guy who'd been fired and then rehired on his own terms. That sends a message. But the real change was internal. I'd learned something valuable during those 7 weeks of unemployment. I'd learned that my worth wasn't tied to any single company or supervisor. I'd learned that relationships and expertise are portable assets that can't be taken away by a vindictive boss or a bad decision by management. 3 months later, in August 2025, I'm still at Northbridge, but my perspective has changed entirely. I maintain my own client relationships, document everything, and keep my consulting LLC active as a backup plan. I'm no longer the loyal company man who works weekends without question and absorbs other people's mistakes without complaint. I'm a professional who understands my value and expects others to understand it too. The photo on my desk isn't just of my mother anymore, though hers is still there in the center. I've added one of my father at her funeral, standing strong despite his grief. It reminds me daily that dignity matters more than any paycheck, that respect is earned but also demanded, and that sometimes the best revenge isn't dramatic or immediate. It's professional, patient, and absolutely devastating. Brent found another job 6 weeks later, at a smaller firm in Milwaukee. I heard through industry contacts that he lasted 5 months before being let go for performance issues. Some people never learn that ambition without competence is just arrogance in a suit. As for me, I'm exactly where I belong, running the operation I built with the clients who trust me, making more money than I ever have, with the security of knowing that if it all went away tomorrow, I could rebuild it somewhere else. That's the kind of power that comes from understanding your own worth and never letting anyone convince you otherwise. Rebecca and I have a good working relationship now. She learned something too during this whole experience, that talented people aren't interchangeable parts, and that treating them as such has consequences. We don't talk about what happened. We don't need to. The lesson was learned by everyone involved. Sometimes I wonder if I should feel bad about how it all played out. Brent lost his job, Northbridge nearly lost millions in revenue, and a lot of people had a very stressful 7 weeks. But then I remember that email termination after my mother's funeral, and I remember that some lessons can only be learned the hard way. The corporate world is full of people who mistake titles for competence and assume that loyalty is weakness. They're wrong on both counts. And sometimes if you're patient enough and professional enough, you can prove them wrong in ways that stick. If you enjoyed this story, like this video and leave a comment letting me know what you thought. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts about new stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.